Me, I'm Dan. I'm social and content manager at oddschecker. So if you're looking at me thinking, why is he on there? I'm only here to introduce it and hand you over to Steve and Andy. So yeah, cheers guys. I'll get out of your way.
Lovely. So yeah, thank you for all joining this exclusive monthly interactive oddschecker Q&A with both myself and Andy. We're probably just going to kind of preview some of Cheltenham, preview some of Punchestown and Newmarket, obviously looking at the Guineas card. And then if you have any questions during this chat, then please put them in and I'll then get forwarded them and we'll obviously then ask away. But Andy, it kind of makes sense to have a look at Punchestown over the next couple of days, really, and we'll have a chat through a few of the races. So what would be your main fancies over the next couple of days?
Well, I think for the purposes of this podcast, we'll try and concentrate on maybe the graded races. If you like, I'd probably want to keep a few back or few up my sleeve as extra ammunition to my rifle for later on in the week in the handicaps, because sometimes I'll stick something up on here and the prices collapse on the day. I end up tipping something at 10 to 1 and it's like 4 to 1 in the morning or something ridiculous. So there are a few in the handicaps I do quite like. I've been keeping my eye on them. I'll be very keen on Slade Steele tomorrow. I put him up to win the Supreme Novices, and I thought, to be honest, he did quite a bit wrong on that occasion, Steve. I don't know about you. He made one or two uncharacteristic mistakes here, there, and everywhere. I don't think Rachel saw a stride on all 8 hurdles, including the last. I think when he was very much getting the better of the battle with Mystical Power anyway, he rather let Willie's horse back in. But I think the impressive part of his game then was what he found off the bridle up the hill. I think he's a very, very streetwise, very tough horse, Slade Steele. And the fact that he's missed Aintree and his main market rival, Mystical Power, has gone to Aintree and had another hard race, I think that'll definitely count in the favour of Henry de Bromhead's horse. And I'd be about as fairly confident as I could be that he would uphold the form. I think sort of around about the 6 to 4, 13-8 mark. He's just about value. He was slightly bigger, obviously, with Ballyburn in the race. I think he was 3 to 1, impending Ballyburn going for the other race, and that has turned out to be the case. Tully Hill was disappointing in the Supreme. I think he's better going right-handed, but his jumping frailties still leave a little bit to desired. Firefox, he's held by Slade Steele, and then you're looking at sort of like the Atlantiques and Asian Masters of this world, who are good horses in their own right, but probably not quite grade 1 and not quite good enough over this trip. So I think this is a fairly straightforward exercise. If Slade Steele runs up to the level that he did at Cheltenham, and I think he will, and he could even improve for a better round of jumping on better ground, then he'd be the one I'd be banking on the most to come up trumps on the first day.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting ride because I thought he was slightly keen early on in the Supreme and then kind of won it as a stayer. So it's going to be interesting to see where Rachel Blackmore actually rides him with regards to position wise. You'd imagine Tully Hill will be prominent again, kind of making the run in. I'm intrigued to see what they do with Il Atlantique because I wasn't sure about him over those intermediate trips. He's been keen during his races at Aintree, and yeah, I thought this drop-in trip would be what he needs. I thought Danny Mullins, I just absolutely love on a front runner.
Yeah,
and I thought if he kind of gets an uncontested lead, I thought he could be quite dangerous at around 16 to 1. But you kind of done yourself a disservice, really. Like obviously anyone that looks at Andy's tips, you put up 2 anti-posts, didn't you? So Slade Steele at 3 to 1 was one of them, and then Nürburgring later in the week in the juvenile hurdle later on.
Yeah, when I was asked to sort of like cover Punchestown and look early doors and try and find a smidge of value, it was quite difficult, wasn't it? It was an exercise in trying to work out who might go where and where the value might be if XYZ goes elsewhere. So it's kind of sorting the wheat from the chaff, and like you do at Cheltenham, trying to work out where Willie Mullins' horse is going to go. My theory was that Ballyburn would probably stay over the 2.5 mile division because he was so dominant at Cheltenham. There was no real need to run him over 2, particularly as he got Mystical Power, Tully Hill, El Atlantique, etc., etc. He didn't want to be putting all his eggs in one basket. I'm a big fan of Slade Steele anyway, so I didn't really need any second invitation with him. We'll get on to Nürburgring later on in the week, perhaps when we touch upon the juveniles, but I thought 4 to 1 was about okay for him. Didn't think he got a great ride at Cheltenham, and maybe he was a little bit better than what he was on the day there. So yeah, those are the 2 that I put up. Looking at the rest of the card, the 2 chases later on the day, Steve, they look quite mouth-watering down to the 5 25, we've got Dino Blue, Captain Guinness, Banbridge. If the ground dries out for him, that'll be fine for him. Gentleman to Me ran well last time, and Ashtree Meadow, Saint Sam, etc., etc. So I think that's a genuinely glittering array of talent for that Grade 1, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely is. Kind of a rematch from the race earlier on in the year at Leopardstown with Dino Blue and Captain Guinness and Gentleman to Me. Banbridge is the really interesting one, isn't he? Dropping back from an intermediate trip back down to 2 miles. He looked outpaced when he ran in that Dublin Racing Festival a couple of years ago in the novice, but they put cheap pieces on, so hopefully he'll travel a bit sweeter. But I was a bit disappointed with him. I know obviously the ground is the main thing with him. According to the Racing Post, currently it's good to yielding, so there shouldn't really be any excuses for him.
Wouldn't have thought so. No, I mean he's a bit of a dead duck, isn't he? On anything worse than sort of good to soft. If it is yielding in any way all the way around, then I think he's in trouble. But he's such a different operator, isn't he? On decent ground, as we've seen so many times. Kempton early on in the season when he was good, at Aintree last year when he was exceptional as well. I think he's probably got a lot more pace than people give him credit for. His time figures over 2 miles that we've got him doing are easily up there with his 2.5 mile times. So he certainly can operate against the good horses over this trip, and I'm pretty sure that he'll leave Cheltenham well and truly behind. I think a lot of people look at him as a really good solid each way alternative to Dino Blue, currently around about the 9-2 mark.
Yeah. Just got a question in from Ross. Thanks for everyone sending in your questions. What sort of run style suits best in the big field handicaps at Punchestown? Do you prefer horses being up with the pace? So, yeah, Andy, I'll come to you first for that.
Yeah, I mean, it varies, doesn't it? It's all about how hard they go and whether they get the fractions right from the front in any chase races. I personally like to see them up, in the van. I'm using Kilcrut as an example. Last year, I don't know if you remember that 2.5 mile handicap chase. He made all the running, and he never looked like getting caught. He got into a beautiful rhythm. I think by and large, Punchestown, it complements horses that jump well and travel well and keep gaining ground from the front. If you can get breathers in at the 2 sweeping bends and fill your horses up and then kick again, I think that's predominantly where you'd like to be most of the time. You don't see too many horses come from huge distances back. So I think in answer to the question, I think if I was looking for run styles and thinking, well, 9 times out of 10, where do I want my horse to be at Punchestown? It would be at the head of affairs.
Yeah, they just seem to make that ground round in the bend, don't they? After the second last, they can really get away, and then it's quite hard to actually peg back. You often see some kind of closing, but they've often closed before that bend. So if you are on a hold-up horse, yeah, you want to see them kind of in the first 5 or 6 round in that bend, approaching the last, really, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, it's like anything else, though, Steve. You know as well as I do. If you have a look at your pace maps beforehand, you don't just think, right, I'm just going to back the front runner, because you might get a situation like we had at Aintree where there was a pace meltdown in the 2 mile race because there was like 5 front runners, and you wanted to be on something just in behind the speed. So it's not just punting there blind and just picking out every front runner. There will be some circumstances where you get horses that will guarantee to be getting an uncontested lead, whereas others, you think, Christ, like there's 4 front runners here. I want to be on something just sitting in behind. So it's about using your noggin, isn't it? In some instances.
Yeah, definitely. While we get more questions coming in, we'll just move forward to Wednesday. We've obviously got a few declarations through for then. The 3 mile novice hurdle, I thought, was a really good renewal this race. Dancing City has obviously been to all the big festivals, around 9-4, the choice of Paul Townend. I thought Better Days Ahead was quite interesting. Obviously, I think they had handicaps in mind with the way he was campaigned prior to Cheltenham to winning the Martin Pipe. Waterford Whispers, all the talk was for that horse in the Martin Pipe, and I thought he stayed on well over 2.5 miles, and I thought the step up in trip to 3 miles would really suit Better Days Ahead. I'm not sure if you're the same opinion.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. When I've had a quick look at the decorations when they came through, I thought this is a slightly below par Grade 1 in general terms. Obviously, we got Grade 1 horses in there, i.e. Dancing City and Stellar Story, but beyond that, much weaker than, let's say, the race at Aintree that Dancing City won and the Albert Barley itself. So if you fancy Dancing City and Stellar Story, I think collectively you haven't got a deeper field than you would have at their respective festivals. But then you look at it, you think, well, Stella Story had a hard race at Cheltenham. It was a bruising encounter. Dancing City had a hard race again at Aintree, on top of a hard run at Cheltenham. So even though they are priced up front in the market, there is a case to be made that perhaps maybe a fresher horse might just be the key. And better days ahead, as you pointed out. Won a very good renewal of the Martin Pipe this season. I don't think you should underestimate the Martin Pipe as just being a handicap and thinking that's as good as they are. I think year in, year out, a lot of the big guns nowadays tend to target that handicap, and they tend to run their very, very best horses in there. As you mentioned, Walk for Whispers, I think he's a graded horse in waiting further down the line, and Better Days Ahead did really well to beat him. The thing of Willie Mullins, is it finished third? Is it Key to Bourbon?
Yeah.
He went on to prove how good that race is by winning easily Air, and that they regard him as a graded horse, and answered the K for running a graded race and won a listed race prior to that. So it was a really strong renewal of the Martin Pipe. And the further that Better Days Ahead went, the better he looked. I think 2 mile 5 was arguably just about his bottom limit of his stamina. So yeah, I agree with you. I think 6-1 for him isn't a bad each way alternative if hopefully all 8 runners go to post, Steve.
Yeah, definitely. We that Martin Pipe always works out. You just got to go back to Sir Deschamps and Don Poley and Banbridge. Obviously, it was only a few years ago.
Galopin Deschamps won it as well, didn't he? In his year.
Exactly. You've moved me on nicely. Galopin Deschamps is favourite for the Punchestown Gold Cup. I'm just going to interject rather than preview that race in full. We've had a question in from Luke. Which Mullins Grade 1 favourite are you most confident in? Now, he's got some short price favourites. Obviously, Galopin Deschamps currently is around the 4 to 6 mark. If we then have a look, currently anti-post from Thursday onwards, he also has Gaelic Warrior 1 to 3. He has Ballyburn at 1 to 3. He has State Man at 2 to 5, and he has Lossymouth at 1 to 3. So he's got some short price favourites. Would you be in a rush to take on any of them?
None of the last 4 that you mentioned. I actually think there's a really good value 3-1 on shot in amongst that lot, and that's Ballyburn.
Yeah,
I actually think he'll go off 7-1 on, 8-1 on, because if you actually look at his race, and I've already had the sort of the devil in me, or already looking at sort of later on in the week and looking at the declarations and who's already been declared to run where. And if you actually go through Ballyburn's race, which I have, I'm just dragging it up now, so I'm not.
Well, you've got Slade Still, who's already been declared. You've got Asian Master already been declared. Tully Hill already been declared. Then you've got the mares obviously in there, Jade DeGruge and Brighter Days Ahead. Are they likely runners? I wouldn't say
they're not. They're not even entered. They're in the anti-post market, but there's only 12 been entered. So you've got Better Days Ahead, Firefox, Slade Steel, and the other 2 you mentioned there, all not going to run. So you're going to be left with a situation where you've probably got the main dangers. Maybe might be Mirazar West, who is a grade 3 horse at best. I mean, you're talking with Ballyburn, who's the best 2.5 mile novice we've seen for many years. That the time figure tells you that at Cheltenham, and the race has already worked out really well, as we saw at Aintree. So I actually think he'll be 8-1 on. so I actually think 3-1 on. If you're an anti-post punter and you're looking at betting something relatively short, I think he's your banker of the whole week. But then, you look at Lossymouth, who should go to the mare's race rather than take on State Man. You've got State Man without Lossymouth in. He'll be more 1 to 5 rather than 2 to 5. So there is a school of thought to think all of those aforementioned 4 all will win, but more predominantly they'll be a lot shorter than what they were once Decoration Day comes. So if I was going to take one on, I actually think it might well be Galopin Deschamps, because he had a hard race in the Gold Cup. And I thought actually at the time, I don't know what you thought, but I thought Fast and Slow was going equally as well than his old rival when he rather uncharacteristically got rid of his pilot I think it was the ditch, wasn't it? Second time around. And we know that he's beaten or accounted for Galopin Deschamps twice, including in this race last year. So he comes here a fresher model. We know he loves the course and distance. He's actually the only one of 2 course and distance winners in the field. Galopin Deschamps actually hasn't won over the track and distance. And he's 130 as against Galopin Deschamps 8-11. So I think if there is going to be a shock, it might well be Fast or Slow turns over Galopin Deschamps.
Yeah, I'd be in agreement with you. It was a soft unseat, wasn't it? Let's call it.
Oh yeah,
what you want. I thought Conflated was quite interesting in that on how they ride him, because I was really impressed with the improvement he showed in first time cheat pieces in the Melling Chase, from behind John Bon. I thought that was an absolutely brilliant run. He'd kind of hit the crossbar a few times and hadn't really finished off his races, but jumped so much better in first time G pieces against John Bon in the Mellon chase. And obviously we saw what John Bon did in the celebration chase on Saturday. Behind him that day was Protector Rat and Envoy LN. So I thought around 20 to 1 he might be a route into it as well. Like you said, Galopin de Champs, he's had one extra race this year as well, hasn't he? So he had Christmas, he had the Dublin Racing Festival and the Gold Cup obviously prior to that. So yeah, if you're going to take one on, Galopin de Champs may well be the one. Just looking at the oddschecker grids at the moment, there has been significant support for Irish Point against State Man. So loading that race now, State Man has drifted out to 2 to 5 best price, and Irish Point into 3 to 1. So you'd imagine Irish Point will be heading to the 2 mile option rather than against Tiapu in the status.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's Tiapu's to lose, isn't it? Particularly whereas Irish Point is not going to turn up. He would be the only sort of logical danger, really, wouldn't he? Because we know Irish Point in isolation is a top class horse between 2 miles and 3 miles. I think he's the only horse that probably could give Tiapu a race. I just think that division's been lacking a standout performer for the last 4 or 5 years. But in Tiapu, now he's actually gone and proven himself how good he is.
It was just someone asking around. Tiapu obviously has the best form fresh. All of his wins, kind of, I think he was unbeaten in 9 starts with the break 50 days or more. It's funny how stats work, isn't it? So he'll have been off for 49 days. So if he was beaten, then everyone will be going into Cheltenham next year saying, there you go, see, he's unbeaten after 50 days afterwards. You've got the likes of Home by the Lee and Buddy One, Asterion Forlonge. Side of Burley would be quite interesting. Obviously had to miss Aintree. I think he was lame in the morning, possibly, which is the reason why he missed Aintree. I'm not sure this track will suit him as well as it previously will have done at Aintree. I really liked him with that stamina test over 3 mile run over that extended 3 miles at Liverpool. What was your thoughts on the Champion Stayers? If you could possibly put your video on, because I still can't see you, and then that'd be great for the recording, Andy.
Hang on a sec. Am I on now?
I can't see your video just yet. I can't see your video just yet.
Hang on. Just bear with me.
No worries. There we go. Perfect. So yeah,
is that it?
Your thoughts? Yeah, your thoughts on the Champion Stayers hurdle?
Yeah, I think other than that rather loose-fitting stat, I think Tiapu's got this ready to lose, hasn't he? I just think this division has lacked a superstar for a little while now, and if there is one, if there is to be one, it is going to be him. A lot of these are just really sort of like grizzled, long in the fang, sort of gnarled horses that I think have perhaps been to the well once a little bit too often. So you might be looking at maybe 1 or 2 of the fresher young legs to come through. I thought Langtree Lady was an interesting one at a price. I thought she ran really well in the mares, and I think the Cessna Stamina will really suit her. But I think she's probably a little bit more ground dependent than 1 or 2 of them in the race. I think she probably wants genuine soft or heavy ground. So yeah, I haven't got a strong view on this race or this division at all. I just think Tiapu will probably win it, and we're better off just taking the even money rather than trying to scratch our heads trying to find some each way value in it when probably none exists. Yeah,
and I think there will be plenty trying to take him on, with that ground being a factor at the same time, with it obviously drying throughout in the lead up to Punchestown. So I imagine even money, even when Irish Point comes out, I can't see him being. You can't see him being sort of a 2s on shot, can you? He'll definitely be closer to evens than a 2s on shot.
I mean, there will be 1 or 2 shocks. I mean, we're trying to try not to paint a picture here where it is going to be a bit dreary with all the short ones winning, but you'd be surprised if the sort of like the 4 or 5 of the big guns do get beat. Any of them, they've all got themselves to beat. Although the only way of beating them is beating themselves more than anything, not making mistakes or things not quite going according to plan. But yeah, I think Tiapu, just stands out in this division, and he's going to be one of the sort of bankers of that particular day, along with one or two others we've mentioned.
Yeah, we'll then switch codes and we'll then move on to the Newmarket action. One of the questions come in is, do you prefer your Guineas horses to have had a prep run that season? And can Rosalian beat City of Troy? Obviously, City of Troy is the big new superstar of the flat. Currently odds on favourite for the 2,000 Guineas. If I'm just going to load it here, I think he was around 4 to 6 when I last checked. He is, and Rosalian, an each-way play, you would say, the obvious each-way play at 4 to 1. What's your thinking of the Guineas at the moment?
Yeah, I'd be looking towards Resilient. I think the fact that Richard Hannon has already won a bona fide trial with Hartem, stands that stable in really good stead. I mean, Hartem was a bit of a shock winner, wasn't he, of the Craven? But yeah, there was no fluke about it. His time was good, and he beat a good field. And you know, he's been long gone record to say Resilient by a country mile better than Hartem. His only defeat came on soft ground, did it? If I recall, when he got beat 2 runs prior. So genuine quick round is the key to Resilient, and he left a real everlasting impression, didn't he, when he won over in Longchamp over Arc Weekend? He was really good that day. I think the mile of Newmarket will really suit him. So this is a really strong clash between City of Troy and Resilient. I think the 4 to 1 is probably the only value bet I could see in the race. I've got a bit of time for Henry Longfellow. I'm not sure whether he'll definitely run, but the fact that he's still in it at the 5-day stage suggests that connections are at least having the conversation of running him. And he's been really impressive also on the numbers as well. He's unbeaten. He's got a good attitude, a really good turn of foot. I don't think we should be completely discounting him either. I think he's probably one of the better value options beyond the front 2 in the market, because I just think he's a real classy individual. But I think he looks a stellar race, doesn't it, Steve? I don't know about you. I think this is a really good Guineas. I don't think we've seen as good as City of Troy, Stroke Resilient down the front end of the market for a little while. I think they could be, having 1 or 2 clashes all the way through the season if all things going well. They probably might meet at in the St James's Palaces if everything goes according to plan in the Guineas. So I'm really looking forward to it, actually. Whether I'll have a bet in it, I don't know. But if you gave me a free tenner now, I'd definitely stick it on Resilient at 4 to 1. I'd resist going each way as well. I'd probably just back him win only.
Yeah, I live about 10 minutes from Newmarket, and it's dried out significantly today. We had a bit of rain, well, a significant amount of rain on Sunday, but there isn't too much forecast. So I imagine it'll be good to soft at worst. So there'll be no excuses ground-wise, I don't think, for either of them. You've got some fascinating contenders in there as well. Kind of Notable Speech and Night Raid are both coming in from all-weather preparations that are very interesting. Ghostwriter, I actually saw him make his debut in the July course. He's a brilliant, big specimen of a horse and will have definitely improved from 2 to 3 to fill into that frame. I thought the one that was quite interesting was Tartfords, really. If you look at how well he's bred, he's a Frankel out of special duty. So he's out of 2 Guineas winners. And on pedigree, you'd be amazed that he was quick enough to do what he did over 6 furlongs last year. He lost his unbeaten record in the Middle Park last season behind Van Dijk, who's a proper sprinter. But I thought an each way play. I thought he's around sort of 16s, 20s. I thought he might be the each way route into it. I do get where you're coming from with Rosalian. As soon as the interviews were with Richard Hannon and Sean Levy, they were pretty much quick to say, well, if Hartem can win this, he's nothing on Rosalian. So that itself is quite a big thing. But you've seen on Twitter in the last few days, Coolmore have already started doing their stallion.
Yes.
Their stallion promotion for City of Troy with some pictures of him on the gallops and videos and bits and pieces that way. I think if he wins this, he'll definitely going to be aimed towards the Triple Crown and go up and trip for the Derby. I think I see Rosalian more of your miler, so you can see him going here, St James's Palace. I think Henry Longfellow is purely in here in case City of Troy stands on a stone or something, or goes lame. I think he's definitely going to head to either France or Ireland. So I'd resist the temptation to look at his 25 to 1 price and think that that's value. I would, and I'm a big fan of Henry Longfellow. I think if he is going to be running, I'd prefer to back him at 5 to 1 when he's actually confirmed for the race, as opposed to 25 to 1 anti-post.
Yeah. Get you. What about the fillies race?
I think Fallen Angel is a worthy favourite here. I kind of went round and round. I'm a big fan of Ylang, but I think she's going to be a middle distance filly this year. I'd be more inclined to back her for the Oaks than what I would the Guineas. The fact that both Dance Sequence and Ramatuelle have both been beaten on their reappearance would kind of put me off them. With regards to the question that we had in around, do you prefer them going straight there? It's quite interesting that I think it was 14 of the last 22,000 Guineas have gone there without a run. So that wouldn't put me off with the Colts. I think the fillies have a better record when they have had a prep run.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure about your opinion on this, but the fact that you could bring horses to the Craven meeting and gallop them before racing, as opposed to actually running in a registered trial, I thought is a bit funny, really. Obviously, Fallen Angel has really good form last year. Won the Moyglare Stud Stakes at the Curragh. The form of that's obviously worked out well. Porta Fortuna was third that day and ended up. Did she win in the Breeders' Cup or did she finish second? I can't remember now.
She finished second in the Breeders'
She finished second.
Breeders' Cup.
Yes, so that's received a form boost, and I thought she was a worthy favourite around 7-2. Really, I wouldn't be in a rush. I'd be happy to find an each way play against City of Troy, but I'd be inclined to back her around the 3-1 mark.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm a little bit more open minded with the 1,000 Guineas, the fillies. I think there's more license for there to be a shock in this race. I think history tells us that we've had some real banana skin results in this, because they come from all sorts, shapes, and sizes. And fillies tend to be sort of a little bit backward and not quite come in their coats, and you don't know whether to go with the form horses who've already had a run, as you just said, or maybe rely on something from last season. I tell you what, I was really, really impressed with, and the time figures that we get really did shout from the rooftops about Star Style when it made its winning debut at Newbury the other day. So much so that I've seen that. I don't know whether this has been supplemented or whether it was already in there anyway. You have to forgive me for that.
I think she was already in. The only one that's been supplemented is Pretty Crystal today.
Right, fair enough. She was already in there then. I'd be very keen if she lined up and took her chance, because I think she could be anything. I mean, she was absolutely devastating, not only in the eye but on the clock at Newbury. And I just love the way she got to line. She had loads of scope and substance. I mean, it's a big ask, isn't it, to win a Newbury Maiden and then go and win a Guineas. But I think she's one of the most interesting runners in that field going forward. And she's 25-1. I think it's one of those ones where you just chuck a few quid on at that price, just hope for the best, I suppose. But I think there'd be worse bets than her in it. And as we know, and you know as well as I do, that Rowley Mile, if you get off there in front and you've got a horse that really operates and points its toe and lengthens from the front, they can be really, really difficult to beat. The pace held up in last year's Guineas. I think the first and two home were always to the fore, and one or two horses couldn't get into it. I think the horse of Dermot Wells that should have won it was too far back. And Star Style, I think, will be ridden aggressively. They know that she's a front running filly and likes to bowl along. I'll be keen on her at a big price.
Yeah, she's 25s across the board looking at the oddschecker grid.
Yeah.
It was an impressive performance. Yeah. I remember watching it, and I've just looked it up now, and I can't quite believe it was 5.5 lengths that she ended up putting between herself and the second that day. It was some performance. It was Homecoming Queen, wasn't it? It absolutely tore them apart from the front one year under Ryan Moore, about 25-1. So
yeah,
it can definitely be done.
Yeah, you have to say it's a funny race, the 1,000 Guineas. It doesn't necessarily always go to the form horse. It's just more reliant on how the track's riding, what fillies are ready on the day, and there's a few undercooked. So I'm always prepared to think a little bit more outside the box in the fillies version.
Yeah, anyone that obviously is a fan of riding styles and everything, the Craven meeting, which was obviously the only Newmarket meeting so far, it had a real tailwind for those couple of days. So it definitely favoured the front runners, but whether that's going to be the same at the 2,000 Guineas and in the 1,000 Guineas is obviously another question. The wind has died down a lot here from then. So just because all the front runners were winning at the first meeting of the season definitely doesn't mean it's going to be the same. We've had an interesting question in on pedigrees. Do you have any concerns about City of Troy training on, considering there's some mixed messages in the pedigree? Obviously, City of Troy by Justify out of Together Forever. Together Forever, looking back at her form, she won the Fillies Mile as a 2-year-old. and then only ran 3 times at 3. She finished second, which I didn't think was a bad run really, behind Star of Seville in the Musadora, and then finished kind of midfield in the Epsom Oaks and the Irish equivalent. Justifies, but we just need to see, don't we, if they train on really. Have you got a big opinion on
Yeah,
on the pedigree?
I'm not a massive pedigree buff. I wouldn't know all the bloodlines, standing on my head, but there was enough sort of like last season. There's quite a few horses that did well, notably at group level. Shamwari, Unless, think of Aidan O'Brien's. There's quite a few horses that made the grade as they got older. So it's not an exact science, is it? Sometimes they follow the bloodlines as they are on paper, and sometimes they don't. I think it was with any other trainer than Aidan O'Brien, you'd say there was a slight doubt. But when you're dealing with the Master of Ballydor, then I'm not going to sort of start banding around stats like that. Let's just see. But I doubt very much anyway myself personally that he won't have a good season.
Yeah, you never really know, do you? Air Force Blue looked like he was going to be an absolute world beater and got beaten at 4-5 in this. He's had the horses August Row down 13-8, and Little Big Bear were both beaten at short prices. 10 Sovereigns was beaten at 9-4, so they can get beaten.
Absolutely, yeah, exactly. I mean, what they do one year into the next, it sometimes doesn't tally up, does it? And other horses might have just caught him up. There's going to be horses from the 2-year-old campaign that have strengthened up, thickened out. They've got perhaps more mature. Only time will tell, and that's a fascination about this time of year, isn't it? We only get to see it played out on the track. A lot of it is educated guesswork, but ultimately it is guesswork. But you just go on what your eyes see, and Brazilian I thought was certainly the equal of City of Troy anyway visually, with their 2 respective victories towards the back end.
Yeah, wonderful. Have you looked at any others sort of races at Newmarket over the weekend before we pull this to a close?
Not intently. There was an interesting runner in. I don't like to talk about handicaps too much because I give my game away a little bit. But Mum's Tipple has been a horse that I've had on my radar for a little while now. I think this horse has been massively unlucky not to win its last 2 races. It was unlucky at Lingfield. I think it was on that Easter weekend, wasn't it? Or it might have been before that. It should have won that day, and I didn't think it got the best of runs through the other day at Kempton on the all-weather. But this horse has definitely dropped down to a rating where it can win off. It's now 97 on the turf, where I think back in the day it was about 110, 105. I know he's a 7-year-old, but he's in the form of his life at the moment. They seem to have got him back. So I predict he'll win a big handicap this season, Mum's Tipple, based on the evidence of what I've seen him in so far in the all-weather. And if the ground dries out, which it looks like doing, then he'd be of some interest should he take his chance in one of those big races towards the weekend. I think he's in that 6 furlong handicap Saturday.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, he was absolutely flying home against Mount Athos. But yeah, 25-1 that day.
Yeah.
Beating a head rate at 102 on the all-weather and is 97 on the flat, so £5 lower. And we definitely know that he handles the turf as well. He's not one of these horses that is showing all of his form on the all-weather, and you don't know if it's going to transfer. So I'm just with one bookmaker here, and 12-1, so you'll get a double figure price about Mum's Tipple in the 145 at Newmarket on Saturday.
Yeah, he'd be a horse that I'd be certainly having half a look at anyway, even at this very, very early stage.
Yeah, it's funny. I was just checking the entries earlier and saw Noble Star was in off top weight in that race and thought, he's quite interesting. And I could just see that the bookmakers have opened up and made it favourite, so he's less so interesting for me.
Yeah. Well, the connections probably told you that was going to be the case, maybe.
Exactly. If he can get back to anywhere near what he was earlier on in his career, it didn't quite happen to him at 3, did it? But if you can get back to what he'd shown previously.
No, it didn't. Yeah, he had a terrible season as a 3-year-old, didn't he? I think he was favourite for was he favourite for the Jersey? Was he at Royal Ascot off memory?
It was funny looking at it. He was sent off 8-11 to beat Shaquille in the Carnarvon Stakes because they ran him in the Guineas and then dropped him back in trip. So yeah, sent off 8-11 to beat a future July Cup winner.
Yeah, it was a bit of a disaster all round, wasn't it? That probably indicative of good old Finn's season in general, wasn't it?
Well, they then tried him in cheap pieces and then blinkers, and they've gelded him and they've chucked everything at him. But yeah, I thought he might be interesting, but at 6-1, I would let him win, and we'll move on to Mum's Tipple. Lovely. We'll put to an end the Q&A then. Thank you everyone for joining. Thanks Andy for joining me on here.
You're welcome.
And we'll see you in the next month or so on another. Thanks everyone for
Cheers,
joining.
Cheers, bud.